Modern technology now means that we have a far greater understanding of human biology than we ever have done in the past. So, this means that we can now be reasonably thinking about how to significantly extend our lifespan, but also, perhaps more importantly, how to significantly extend our health span. That means living a healthy lifestyle all the way up until the end of our lives. But what exactly should we be doing to try to make this a reality? Should we be making changes to our lifestyle? What kinds of things should we be eating? And what kind of habits should we be avoiding? Well, all of these questions are the subject of this week's conversation with Andrew Panella. Andrew is the founder of the Longevity Lifestyle Twitter page. He's an author, he's written a couple of books, and he's got a program which you can all find out about if you check him out online. And I wanted to speak to him about longevity in general, but also this idea of health span and what kinds of things that we can all be doing to make sure that we live long, healthy lives. So, without further delay, here is Andrew Panella.
Complete check. Hands.
Hello, friends. I am here with Andrew Panella. Andrew, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
I am doing extremely well. Thank you, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing good. Looking forward to a exciting conversation all about health and longevity.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Good to have you on. So look, lots I want to talk to you about. The specifics of different things that we can do with our lives to improve our longevity. But first of all, I would love to hear a bit more about your journey, where you're at currently, and how you kind of came to be in this world of health and longevity that you find yourself in.
Yeah, no, happy to share. I would say, I mean, as I grew up, I was always an extremely avid sports player. I was pretty into, health and wellness while I was growing up. But then as I got to college and even after college, I had a series of injuries on my knees, on my hips, and it sent me on a journey just to learn as much as I possibly could about the human body and why this was happening to me. And so I ended up just reading hundreds of different books and listening to hundreds of podcasts. And I really started to develop a huge passion for it. And so as I was, filling these books with sticky notes and highlights, and I just started to create content and post it on Twitter. And I found that a lot of it was stuff that was helpful to people. I had a lot of people reaching out to me for questions. And I've spent the last 10 years professionally in the software sales space. And I worked in education technology for about 5 years. Right now, I'm still working for a community of social impact leaders. But on the side, I've just been sharing this information on Twitter. I've had a lot of people that have come to me that I've been able to coach. I've built some amazing friendships and relationships on there. And I'm looking forward to actually doing this full time at the start of next year. So that's a little bit more about me.
Awesome. So your Twitter name is Longevity Lifestyle, right? So how do you think about the possibility of significantly extending the human lifespan? Like, is it a super achievable thing we can do now? Is it something that we should be thinking about in the future? Like, how are you coming at this topic?
Yeah, I chose the name because I really believe in order to live a long and healthy life, it has to be your lifestyle choices. That's really what kind of impacts the outcomes in your life. And I've heard Peter Attia talk about it a couple times as far as like not liking the word longevity, because for some people that just means living as long as humanly possible. And I truly believe that longevity is living healthy for as long as possible. So you're not dealing with chronic disease, you're not bedridden, you lose your mobility or lose your mental facilities. And so as far as human lifespan, there's a lot of folks out there that are doing some really interesting research as far as trying to reverse or slow aging. I don't know how much of it is really moving the needle. Unless we're able to prevent the decline in our stem cell reserves, I'm not totally sure that it's going to be feasible. But there are definitely a lot of folks like David Sinclair and his team at Harvard. They've had some really interesting stuff they're doing in animal models to extend lifespan. There's folks experimenting with different molecular compounds. So I think it's possible that we extend human lifespan, but I don't think it's going to be the way some people frame it up as like it's going to be normal to live to 150 plus. I don't think we'll fully get there, but I do think we're going to be able to extend health span where people are we're already seeing it. People living into their 70s, 80s, and 90s in absolutely phenomenal health. I just don't know if it's beyond 150. You're basically like living in a lab somewhere. It's just not realistic.
Interesting. Because I don't know if you follow like Brian Johnson. There's a guy that I spoke to on here previously, Thomas Chapin, who is also one of the kind of I'd say like techno optimists in the longevity space who really do think that we can dramatically extend human lifespan with various different technologies. But when I spoke to Thomas, he was very keen to make the same point that you have, which is that it's not about just living forever as like a vegetable, right? Like the health span is actually the most important bit. Like an 80-year healthy lifespan is preferable to a 100-year health span that's plagued by chronic disease and bad mobility and all of that sort of stuff. So like I definitely agree with you on that point.
I think if we were to significantly extend the human lifespan, the question becomes, what does that look like? If we have, if we've extended lifespan because we're able to retain somebody's consciousness past the point of them losing their physical body, and it's like something out of a sci-fi novel where there's like a brain floating in a tank and they can still communicate. Maybe, but that's not really, to me, that's not really like, I like to go outside. I like to walk, run, jump, play sports and games. So I don't know if that's like a good extension of human lifespan. So I guess it just depends on who you ask and really what that means.
Yeah. And look, I think most serious people in the field, really what they're talking about is health, right? It's if you want to maximize your normal human lifespan, then it's about living in a healthy way for as long as you can, right? And minimizing your chances of disease. Because I think, there's I had a guy on called James Richards, who's a cancer survivor. He had male breast cancer, and he was talking about these treatments, nanobots and stuff like that. I'm pretty convinced that there will be a cure for cancer within the next, 15, 20 years, maybe. The technology is moving so fast, but the main thing is the health, right? It's the things that we can do ourselves, which is what I want to talk to you about, I guess. So on that then, let's talk through the basics of what you're telling people, what you're communicating. What are the basics in terms of what we should be eating, and what the kind of, should we all be like lifting insane weights in the gym and, deadlifting like, twice our body weight, or are there more simple steps that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, when it comes to what we should be eating, I really try to make it as simple as possible for people. And I think what a lot of people, a good starting point for folks is when you think about like the macronutrients, the main three that, folks talk about: fats, protein, carbohydrates. Each of them plays a different role in the body. So you can think of protein like the building blocks for your cells, your amino acids. You're breaking them down. You're rebuilding the tissues in your body. Fats are building blocks and a fuel source. So all of our cell membranes are made of fat. So you obviously need healthy fats in your diet. But your body also can use fat as a fuel source, whereas carbohydrates are really purely a fuel source. So you think about the three. You got the building blocks, the fuel and building block, and then the purely fuel. I think that's a helpful framework for people to think about what they're consuming in their diet, what they need to prioritize. And then you really have two goals with your diet. The first is you want to maintain metabolic flexibility. And what that means is you've evolved to either be running on carbohydrates or fats as a fuel source, and your body should be able to flexibly switch between both of them very easily.
Okay.
And I think what a lot of people struggle with is if we consume in excess, whether it's calories or carbohydrates, we forget how to run on fats. And so we end up stuck in this storage mode where people just continually store fuel for the long term, which is we store it as fat on the body. And so Metabolic flexibility is absolutely critical because you have to be able to switch between running on carbohydrates and running on fats. When you can run on fats, that's how you burn the excess fat off your body and prevent the visceral fat buildup around the belly.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So the the like most people, well, or people that struggle with their weight, then they've got stuck in a cycle of just going around and round the carbohydrate cycle. So eating too much, storing it, and their body is unable to switch into fat burning mode. So why is that? Why have we become like that?
It's excess fuel. So when people are constantly like, you have a demand on your fuel reserves every single day, and it depends on how much you're moving, your activity levels. Are you, playing sports every day? Are you in the gym? Are you going for runs? If you are, you're obviously going to put a higher demand on your body to provide fuel. But most people are living a very sedentary lifestyle and still eating in excess of the fuel that they need. So the body, because we've been designed this way to try and survive, it takes that excess fuel and stores it usually around the belly and other areas of the body as fat. So that's really the main problem, is a lot of people are living in this state of excess consumption without a high demand for burning that energy.
So I think we should probably at this point define our terms slightly. So when we're talking about storing carbohydrate as fat, we're also talking about eating fat. And so does that fat that you eat also get stored as fat? And how does that interplay kind of work?
Yeah, it can. So when you are eating both carbohydrates and fat, your body is basically taking the carbohydrates and it's using some of them immediately. It's then storing some of them as short-term storage. You can store about 24 to 36 hours worth of carbohydrates, and that gets stored in your liver and your muscle tissue. And then fat in your diet as well can be used as fuel. But again, if you have a ton of carbohydrates, they're more readily available for your body to use as fuel. And so the fat in your diet will just end up contributing to that excess caloric intake, which again just keeps you in the storage mode.
Right. Okay. And so,
for example, people that do practice like the ketogenic diet, they don't eat really any carbohydrates at all. I think most people try to keep it below 50 grams of carbohydrates a day. So they're getting most of their fuel from the fat in their diet. So it's not sort of putting them into that excess mode. They're actually training their body to run on fat.
And so do you recommend things like the keto diet then? I mean, because it feels like there are, I kind of pay attention to a lot of the podcasts and stuff that you mentioned that you get into. It seems like there's a lot of different competing theories, right? Like some people say you should be doing keto, some people say you should be carnivorous, some people say actually no, you should be plant-based mainly for your gut and all of this stuff. Where do you kind of sit on that spectrum? How do you advise people?
This is going to sound super cliche, but I really promote things in moderation. So I don't think that people need to be practicing a keto diet for the long term. I do think that putting your body through periods of ketosis, which means fat burning, is extremely beneficial. So ketosis is something the body naturally goes into. When it runs out of carbohydrates for fuel, it then switches to fat if it's metabolically flexible. And so people should naturally be fluctuating between running on carbohydrates and running on fats. But being on the ketosis, sort of keto diet, means you're only running on fats for the long term. And I just know that can result in hormonal imbalances, sometimes mineral deficiencies. I mean, you do want some carbohydrates in your diet, and you want to go through periods of fluctuation because your body has evolved for that. If we came across a patch of fruit, we would eat as much as we possibly could, store those carbohydrates, and then we'd go on with our hunter-gatherer lifestyle. And then when we ran out of carbohydrates, our body would switch to fat burning, and maybe we, successfully hunted and had an animal and would get, the fat and protein from that. So long-term ketosis, I don't typically recommend for people. It can be helpful when somebody's trying to lose weight because they have so much excess fat stored that they have enough to be in long-term ketosis. But especially for somebody that is at or near their desired weight, I don't think the sort of keto diet as a long-term solution is a good way to go.
Right. Okay. I guess that this idea of metabolic flexibility ties in with that idea of, like you were describing, the kind of caveman, being flexible by necessity in prehistory, almost trying to replicate that in the modern world.
Yeah, that's how I think about most elements of our health is what would our ancestors have been doing here? Or why did we evolve this mechanism in our body based on the life that we were living previously? And I think there's a lot we can learn from the thousands and even millions of years of evolution of humans. And so I frequently go back to what would our hunter-gatherer ancestors be doing, or why did we evolve this mechanism? How is this helping them survive? And then how can we apply that to the modern lifestyle?
So with all of these different diets then, paleo, keto, plant-based, I guess what you're saying is none of them are necessarily right or necessarily wrong, but you should moderate. So if you're going to do keto, do it for a while, get your body used to kind of working in that mode, and then come back out of it, maybe have some carbs and go to maybe a more plant-based, move around them and keep your body guessing almost. Is that like your good summation of your philosophy?
Yeah, and everybody is different, right? Some people have a more hyperactive immune system. They may respond more aggressively to plants in their diet. It may actually cause inflammation for them. Some people respond really well to eating a more carnivore-based diet. And there are long-lived communities all around the world that have completely separate diets, like some that are extremely high in starchy, carbohydrate-rich vegetables, some that are almost purely meat-based, others that are like a mix of both or extremely high in fat. So I think part of it does depend on your background. You have to sort of figure out what works best for you. I really don't think there's one size fits all, but I think even within what works for you, there should be some sort of natural fluctuation of eating seasonally and having periods where you may be consuming a higher fat content in your diet or a higher carbohydrate content. I think that all plays a role, but you really got to find what works for you.
Do you, as many people do you think bread is evil?
I don't think it's evil. I typically steer people away from bread. I mean, I think sourdough bread is probably the best option because the fermentation process actually allows the bacteria to digest some of the glucose in advance. So you're not getting as high of a glycemic load. It's not going to spike your insulin quite as much. And you're also not going to have as much gluten protein to have to digest, which for most people is inflammatory.
Really? So most people are gluten intolerant because it's almost become a joke now. Everybody says they're gluten intolerant, but so that is the case then.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple people that have celiac, which is like extremely high gluten intolerance. So like they'll have a beer or two and they'll throw up because it's that sensitive. But everybody does respond to gluten in an inflammatory way.
Okay, wow. So
listen, you got to be able to live your life. If you want to be able to have, your pizza or your bagels, I think that's totally fine. Again, moderation. I wouldn't, like for me personally, I wouldn't be doing that more than maybe once a week as like a treat. But you got to be able to live your life.
Yeah. So I hear a lot about inflammation these days. Seems like that's another kind of buzzword that people are increasingly concerned about more recently. Is that something that you're talking to people about a lot? Is it a concern that we should all have, thinking about reducing inflammation in our body through diet?
Absolutely. I think inflammation is the root cause of most chronic diseases, if not all of them.
Wow.
And part of the goal in being metabolically flexible is to keep inflammation down. So when your body is stuck in fat storage mode, you can think of it as like you have all these workers, your lipoproteins, you talk about like LDL, HDL. you have all these workers in your bloodstream that are trying to shuttle fuel to your muscle tissues. And if there's too much fuel, they're like carrying these bags of fuel that are spilling out. So then you have inflammation taking place because your immune system's like, what is this? This isn't supposed to be in the body. And so
Right.
that's where retaining metabolic flexibility is really important, because you end up basically like having spillover of different sort of toxins and other molecules in your body that cause inflammation. And then once you have inflammation, your immune system starts to attack it. That's where you get the buildup of like arterial calcium that leads to heart disease and blockages. Right. So yeah, inflammation is definitely something. At the end of the day, most of us, when we're trying to live a healthier lifestyle, what we're really trying to do is reduce inflammation in our body.
Right. Okay. Okay. And so inflammation is, and I'll just be clear here that this is, we're not doctors. So we're talking diet and nutrition, but so just so I'm clear, inflammation is essentially the immune system responding to energy sources that are being located in places around the body where they shouldn't be, and so it's responding to that.
Inflammation is the body's immune response to really anything foreign in the body that it perceives as a threat. Yeah. So normally that's a good thing, because the body is going to attack pathogens or like harmful bacteria and viruses that are in the body. But when we have spillover from toxins, or like we're eating in excess, we have spillover in our body, the immune system just starts to treat everything like a foreign molecule. And then you have chronic inflammation. So your immune system's on high alert. And if you have your immune system acting around the clock on excess, glucose or molecules in your bloodstream, it's going to actually reduce the effectiveness of your immune system, because it's not going to be as sensitive to finding the actual harmful bacteria and pathogens.
Okay. And I've seen, I was checking out your Twitter before this conversation to make sure that I was doing my homework. I've seen you posting about fermented foods recently. So I personally find fermented food incredibly distasteful. I don't like it. So can you convince me why I'd need to put up and shut up and eat it?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked, because as I said earlier, you really have two goals with your diet. Number one is to retain metabolic flexibility. Number two is to protect and feed your gut microbiome. So every single one of us is really a meta-organism. We have 100 trillion different micro organisms in our body. That's more than the amount of cells we have in our body. And they play a role in everything. Our metabolism, our immune system, they're a huge factor, and we're really at the tip of the iceberg for understanding how they impact our health. What we do know is that they do play a huge role, and especially, they've done tests in long-lived communities and looked at their bacteria composition and found that in some of the longest-lived communities, there's similarities. Even when they're all over the world, there's specific strains of bacteria that live in our bodies that are extremely beneficial. So where fermented foods come into play is they actually contain a lot of these bacteria. So up until about 150 years ago, we didn't have refrigerators. The only way that we were able to store foods for the long term was to allow them to ferment. And so we used to consume those foods regularly, and that would provide our body with these bacteria that would then populate our gut microbiome and help build a robust immune system, and prevent inflammation, all the good stuff we just talked about. So you said you don't like fermented food. Do you consume any kind of dairy?
Yes, actually I do. So I'm thinking like the sort of vinegary pots of, vegetables. But yeah, no, dairy, yes, yeah. What about beer? Beer's fermented. Does that count? Obviously there's the alcohol that you also is very much not good for you, but does it count on the fermentation scale?
Not really. No, beer doesn't really contain. I know. I wish. No, beer doesn't really contain significant number of helpful bacteria compared
Okay.
to any kind of like raw dairy, like cheese,
Yeah.
yogurt, even raw milk. I mean, unfortunately, when you pasteurize dairy, you kill off a lot of the bacteria. I know we do
Right.
that to, protect us against harmful bacteria, but we, throw the baby out with the bathwater there. We're killing the good bacteria as well, which is why a lot of folks are now talking about the benefits of raw dairy, like raw cheeses and raw milk, which I actually, if you can get it from a good source with healthy animals that are living on, a pasture and eating grass, not in a central confined feeding operation, I think raw dairy can be a great source of these beneficial microbacteria that populate your gut.
Okay. Okay. And so what else? So are you fermenting vegetables in pots?
I am, yeah. I'm a big fan of fermented vegetables. I love
Okay.
kimchi and sauerkraut. I probably have it every day. And
Okay.
it's pretty easy to make. So if you have access to vegetables, you get some mason jars. You can do it with just a normal lid to a glass mason jar, or you can get these easy fermenter lids. I think you can get them online for, it's like $20 for a pack of 4 of them.
Okay.
And you basically you rinse the vegetables, you put salt and maybe some spices on them, and then you fill the mason jar with water. You put a little bit of salt in there, and you put the vegetables in there, and you leave them for anywhere from 10 to 30 days. So that's,
Okay.
again, that's how our ancestors used to preserve food. They would put,
Yeah.
fermentable vegetables or fruits in jars or pots, and then they would leave them and basically cover them. And then
What
the
about
bacteria would also would actually preserve the food for them.
yeah? What about like jam? Is that because that's a preserve? Like, but does that is that fermented? I don't. Do you have jam in the US?
No, yeah, we have jam. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
but no, that's the sort of
Too much sugar.
store inserted preservatives are not the same as the actual live microbes
Yeah.
that are in fermented foods. And a lot of fermented foods, right on the label, it'll say live cultures. That'll just let you
Right.
know that there's actual live bacteria in that food. That's
Yeah.
what you want
Yeah.
to look for.
Yeah. 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 My wife has a cup of live bacteria that she drinks every morning. But I just can't face it. But I feel like maybe I should after this conversation.
What's interesting is the bacteria in your gut actually influence significantly your cravings. So you produce, I think it's about 90% of the serotonin in your body comes from your gut. So serotonin, obviously the hormone that makes you feel sort of content, satisfied. So your gut filled with these bacteria is actually dictating your mood and your thoughts. And so if you eat some bacteria from, let's say, fermented vegetables like kimchi, and you do that every day, after like a week or two, you're going to start to crave kimchi because you've populated your body with the bacteria from that, and they're going to send signals to your brain to say, "Oh, we want more. Keep
We
feeding
want
us.
more. Yeah. Yeah.
Like we want our other friends to join us." But the other part of it too, so the bacteria themselves, it's what people call probiotics. So
Probiotics. Yeah.
some
Yeah.
people will like take the capsules of bacteria, and I think that can be helpful, but it's not really long lasting. The other element to like feeding your bacteria is with prebiotics. So
Okay.
things like the fiber in fruits and vegetables, even the fibrous tissue in animals, will provide long chain fatty acids that are actual fuel for these bacteria in your body. So
Okay.
you not only need to eat the bacteria, you need to eat the fuel source for the bacteria, which is why, again, if you're eating kimchi, you're actually going to start to crave, or like people that will eat, salads all the time, they'll actually start to crave salads because the bacteria in their gut are saying, hey, we love this fiber that you're giving us from, the kale or whatnot. We want more of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And so, do you eat a lot of vegetables then? Because some people there seems like a lot of like two very conflicting views on a very plant heavy diet, right? Some people have gone full carnivore now, but I'd always assumed, and I still think my gut tells me, no pun intended, my gut tells me that eating lots of vegetables has got to be good for you, right?
Yeah, I find it a little disheartening that we have these diet wars when
Yeah.
there's one common enemy, and it's processed foods. I think if you're eating a diet that's based on real foods, stuff that's minimally processed, I would say the most processed you want is like the dairy, but fruits, vegetables, meat, I would say it's all fair game. Like I said, some people respond to
Mm.
certain foods worse or better than others. For me personally, I am all about the moderation. As I said, I have
Yeah.
periods where I'm eating a lot of meat. Usually that's like winter months, like I'll make some like stews and soups. It'll be sort of meat heavy. But then summer months, I'll have a lot more fruit. My wife and I have a garden, and this year it was like the Swiss chard and the kale were off the charts. So it was like I was eating tons of salads. So I mean, it just depends. And I listen to my body. If I'm feeling like a little bit more sluggish on certain days, I'll kind of think back, like, what did I eat the last like week or two? Like, how was I eating? I'll make little tweaks. So I'm very much a proponent of seasonal eating, rotating. I have times of the year where I do higher vegetable amounts, higher fruit amounts, times of the year where I do more meat. But the consistent theme for me, there's really like two metrics. It's the fermented foods as much as possible. I try and eat them every day. And then as far as macronutrients, I'm really focused on protein, trying to make sure I'm getting enough of that because that's the most satiating. So
Right.
to make sure I feel full and I don't overeat, also to maintain lean muscle mass, which is another really important key to longevity and maintaining your mobility. Protein is absolutely key.
And are you able to do that when you're in a more plant-based phase?
Yeah, so one of the sort of plants or legumes that I eat a lot of, we have a pressure cooker, and it is incredibly cheap to get high quality legumes, like any kinds of beans, garbanzo beans, black beans, pinto beans. You can get high amounts of them for very cheap, and they store forever because they're like you can dry storage. So I'll just cook up big batches of those, and sometimes I'll have like a bowl of chickpeas. I'll have some like parsley in there. I'll add some yogurt. So I don't really have any times of the year where I'm 100% plant based because it is really hard to get the amount of protein that I'm targeting, which is about a gram per pound of body weight. I'm not sure what that would be in kilograms.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't work in pounds. Yeah, people can figure it out. They've got Google. They've got ChatGPT.
Yeah. So yeah, it can be challenging. I think like having an option of protein shakes or bone broth is always good. But
So protein shakes. So I was going to come on then to ask you about this, about shakes. So protein shakes, first of all, it seems like most people use protein shakes, but obviously it's quite processed.
yeah.
It's processed protein. So it sounds like you use them. Are they unalloyed good? Is there anything to be careful of?
A lot of proteins, whey proteins, are filled with junk ingredients. So
Right.
I have found it to be somewhat challenging to find a high quality whey protein. It's also your body doesn't absorb a ton of it. I think we absorb like 50% of whey protein. It may even be less.
Right.
So one of the sources of protein that's primary for me is bone broth. I'm a huge fan of bone broth. It's
Okay.
got all the essential amino acids. You can get it in the hydrolyzed form, which is like the little granules, and you just pour it into a hot cup of water, add some salt and garlic. You can even spice it up with like a little bit of olive oil and rosemary, and you absorb
Sounds
more of the
great.
protein. Oh, it's so good, especially during the winter months when it's colder. It's amazing. I just had a cup before I hopped on. I love it. I drink it every day, pretty much.
Nice. Yeah.
But yeah, as far as protein, I do think it could be helpful, especially for folks that are trying to lose weight and want low calories. Bone broth or whey protein is a great way for them to help feel full without consuming in excess. And even as you get older too, I think for folks that are trying to protect and preserve their muscle mass, whey protein can be a great resource as long as you find one that is not filled with a whole lot of junk.
Okay. And what about other shakes? So do you have Huel in the US?
No,
HUEL?
I looked it up when you shared it with me.
Oh,
I
did
don't
you?
know if we
Okay.
have that here in the U.S.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I won't ask you about that then. So I drink it, and it's got like all of your daily vitamins and minerals, and they call it engineered nutrition. But I'm no expert, so I was going to ask you about it. But so what about like AG1, that kind of stuff? Like, are you a fan of that, or do you prefer just going as natural as you can?
Yeah, I think those supplements, those sort of what would you call them, like nutritional, almost like multivitamins, can be really helpful to make sure that people are hitting the nutrients that they need in their diet, especially if they don't have access to a lot of fresh foods and they struggle to eat a diet of real foods. I think those can be helpful. I don't think everybody needs them. I think if you're eating a diet that's pretty well rounded, you don't necessarily need them. AG1 is extremely expensive. I think it's like $100 a month. There's a couple knockoff brands. Like I take a green powder from Enzo Superfoods. It's like less than half the price of AG1. It's basically the same, and it's all organic. So I do occasionally take those. The only other thing I would flag for people when taking those supplements that are sort of like the green mixtures is there are a lot of the inflammatory plant compounds in them. So you have like oxalates, which are one that Paul Saladino, the guy, Carnivore MD, he talks a lot about those. And for some people, they can be really irritating to their gut, to their joints. Again, it depends on your immune system. I don't tend to respond super poorly to them, but if I'm eating a ton of plants or taking those supplements in excess, I think I feel it a little bit. So I would just be aware for people, if they are taking those supplements, to be aware of the dose. And if they're feeling like joint pain or soreness, like maybe rotate on and off and see if that's the reason.
Okay. Okay, so look, we've talked a lot about diet and supplementation. What about movement? So we're both, well, I'm sitting in a chair that I spend most of my day in. I like modern life. I don't think is kind to the human body. What are the big risks of the way we live our lives, and how should we mitigate them?
I mean, another cliche phrase, movement is truly medicine. So we live, as you said, we're in a society where people are sitting for huge portions of the day. And I think there are some really easy ways to mitigate that. Like I use a standing desk. I'm standing right now. I'm frequently like moving my legs when I'm talking to people. Sometimes people are like, yo, why are you moving? It's distracting. But I really think there are some simple ways for people to incorporate more movement. If you are somebody that even works in an office space, I used to, when I would go into the office, I'd bring a foam roller. I would do every hour to 90 minutes, I would go outside and do like a couple laps around the building just to get moving. So I do think that's something that should be really low-hanging fruit for people. Even walking is a fantastic form of exercise that more people should be doing, especially people that end up sitting for huge portions of the day. If you're on your feet for your job, that's obviously another thing. But for most people, it's like they wake up, they get in a car or ride a metro to work. They sit in an office all day. They come home. They sit on the couch. There's like no movement. And maybe they'll go to the gym or they'll go for like a quick run. But even if you're doing like a 2-mile run, but that you're sitting for the rest of the day, it's not enough. And unfortunately, when you sit for long periods of the day too, you end up shortening your muscles and your hips. You get tight. And then when you do exercise, if it's like short bursts of intense exercise or you're going for a run, you're actually putting yourself at a higher risk of injury because you're not actually retaining mobility and moving throughout the day. So I'm a huge proponent of like micro movements, like just get up, do some jumping jacks, some air squats, some push-ups, just walk around the block a couple times. I would recommend people every 45 minutes to an hour, try and move for like 5 to 10 minutes at least.
Get a dog, maybe. That forces me to go and walk every morning and evening.
Dogs are a
So
great resource.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's and it means you get out early as well. It does. Since getting a dog, I walk an awful lot more than I used to because you've got no choice, right? It's cruel if you don't. You can't just say, "Oh no, I can't be bothered," like because well, the dog needs to walk,
Yeah,
otherwise he's going to do a shit on the carpet.
exactly
It's
right.
yeah, it's got to be done.
I'm dog sitting right now, and she's looking out the window next to me and keeps on coming over to me. She's like, "When are we going to go outside?" So it's the same exact thing. It's like forces you
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get outside.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready for a dog full time, but dog sitting is definitely a good way to get outside.
Oh, you got to get one. Yeah, they are. But they can be annoying, but it is great. I was very skeptical. My wife made me get one, and I wouldn't change it now.
No,
Very
dogs are super great.
yeah, yeah. So what about feet? Right? That I've read on your page amongst others that shoes are messing up our feet somehow. So what's the deal there? Should we be walking around barefoot more often?
I'm a huge proponent of barefoot for a
Yeah.
multitude of reasons. I mean, your feet
Okay.
are really the foundation for your entire body mechanically, all the way up through your neck and your skull. And unfortunately, modern footwear, while it provides a lot of cushion and support, in doing so, it allows our lower body, our feet in particular, to become really weak. So when you have a ton of cushion and support, your feet, your ankles, your knees, all of it's going to get a little bit weaker because it doesn't have to, or it's not fully sort of engaged the way that it would be if you were barefoot. And then it ends up kind of messing up your posture, and it can mess up your walking gait as well. I mean, we obviously evolved to be walking the majority of the time barefoot. So I always tell people being barefoot is extremely helpful for your posture, even like your just general flexibility and the way that you move in any format is helped by having strong feet, strong ankles. The other thing too is you have more nerve endings per square inch on the bottom of your feet than anywhere else on your body. So
Really?
yeah, your feet take
Even
in
your
a
hands?
ton of sensory perception of the world around you. And so
Wow.
I actually love, like, I'm barefoot right now. I always, when I'm working at my desk, I'm always barefoot. I love going outside barefoot. And it helps stimulate the mind. I mean, with all those nerve endings, your body is picking up on the world around you through your feet. You know, obviously you have your other senses, but your sense of touch, your feet are probably the strongest or have the most significant sense of touch in your whole body.
Have you seen these barefoot shoes that you can get now, where they've just got a much wider at the toes?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I have a couple pairs of
Yeah.
barefoot shoes.
Okay. Yeah.
Really all I wear. Sometimes I
Really?
wear Crocs
Okay.
because Crocs are pretty wide as well.
So,
But
and do you wear them to the gym? Do you wear them like running?
I work out barefoot. Yeah, so I have barefoot
Wow.
shoes that I wear go to the gym. I don't have a gym membership anymore. I just work out at home,
Okay.
and so I work out barefoot every time I do my workouts.
Wow. Okay. And you've noticed the benefit going from sneakers to barefoot. You feel it.
Definitely. I mean, it was forced upon me. I had I tore my meniscus in my right knee 4 different
Wow.
times. I had surgery on both my hips, and one of my issues was I was constantly wearing shoes, and they were just putting my whole lower body and upper body out of alignment. So my hips were tilted, like, and a lot of modern footwear too. Not all shoes are created equal. Even like, not a knock on Nike, but you take a pair of brand new shoes and put them next to each other. Both shoes are not equal every time. And so you're
Yeah.
frequently putting on even brand new footwear that is pushing your body in one way or another out of balance. And
Yeah.
so for me, going barefoot was an immediate change. One thing I will say is it takes an adjustment. So
Right.
from an alignment standpoint, it can help right off the bat. But for folks that are used to wearing modern footwear, their feet will frequently get really sore. I made the mistake of like going out and running 4 miles barefoot within like the first year that I started doing barefoot, and I felt myself getting like a stress fracture in my foot. So be careful. You're not supposed to run on concrete barefoot. We did not evolve for that. And I even
Right.
wouldn't
Yeah.
go out and run on grass for a long period of time until you've been living primarily barefoot for a while. So
Yeah.
anytime
Yeah.
you're home, be barefoot. Obviously, if you're going to the office or going anywhere else in the world, probably more appropriate to wear shoes. But there are some great options for barefoot shoes too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm going to get some. Try them out. But yeah, interesting. And so you think a lot of your problems that you had then, injuries, knees, ankles, was caused by improper posture, which was exacerbated by footwear.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of reasons. One of them was definitely the fact that I didn't dedicate enough of my exercise regimen to flexibility and mobility.
Okay.
It was cardio and it was strength training. So I was running all the time. I was going to the gym and lifting heavy. And then I was like playing soccer and hockey multiple times a week. So that was a big element to it. I was not adding enough stability training for my mobility to be able to like move quickly and balance properly. And I was not stretching enough. I was not working on flexibility, which really provides the room, like the margin of error for your body. If you're not flexible, the margin of error is tiny. So if you're like out of alignment for a second and you plant wrong, like you can easily blow out a knee or mess up one of your hips or back. I mean, you got people dealing with orthopedic injuries all over the place now. And I think that's a huge part of it. People don't move enough. So their body doesn't have the capabilities that they need to be doing those movements. The other element was absolutely from a nutrition and diet standpoint, I was in a state of very high inflammation. I think part of it was alcohol. I was in a phase of my life where I was, drinking a fair amount on the weekends, but I also was I did not have my diet quite dialed in. It was a lot of more like breads, more processed foods. So there's a combination of reasons, but the barefoot definitely helped a lot.
So you touched on alcohol, and I know that we don't have. You've been very generous with your time, but we're running up on an hour. But you touched on alcohol briefly. Do you drink now? And how bad is it?
Yeah, so I share a very similar belief to Peter Attia. I did my time. I had a period of time where I was drinking fairly heavily, fairly regularly, and my body sort of fell apart on me. And I think for anybody that's doing that, unfortunately, it will happen sooner rather than later. So there's really no, I would say, safe dose. Safe's not the right word, but like there's no healthy dose of alcohol. Even people that are like, yeah, 1 glass of red wine a day, you're getting antioxidants. The amount that alcohol disrupts your sleep alone is reason not to drink it. Even a single glass of alcohol, and Andrew Huberman talks about this all the time on his podcast. Even a single glass of alcohol earlier in the day will disrupt your sleep. And so if you're disrupting the time in which your body is repairing and recovering, it's going to impact you the next day. And so definitely for folks that are having like a glass of wine a day thinking it's not affecting them, it is affecting them, unfortunately. So the short answer to your question is I do drink. I just am very picky with when I drink and what I drink. If I am hanging out with some of my closest friends and like we're going hiking or something and I want to have like a cold beer afterwards, of course, I'm going to live my life. I'll go out to dinner with my wife. Well, I'll have a glass of wine or two, but I really am very selective with the quality of alcohol that I'm drinking and the quantity. I probably drink once a month, maybe twice a month, depending on what I have going on. And it's never in excess. I never really get above 3 drinks at the most. And that's if I'm at like a family member's wedding.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because I'm planning on going entirely sober next year, just to see what it's like. I haven't. I've sort of thought to myself, the last time I had a whole year when I didn't drink, I would have been like 14 or something. I mean, I don't even know, maybe even 13. But like my body hasn't had an entire year of being of full sobriety since I was a teenager. So I'm kind of thinking, well, I'll try it out, see how see how I feel, and then maybe I'll go back afterwards. But yeah.
You'll be surprised at where you notice it. For me, it's the mornings. I'm a morning person. I'm frequently up around 5 a.m. I love getting up before the sunrise. It's like my alone time. I can do a bunch of reading, meditating, writing, and when you drink, even if it's one drink, I'll wake up 2 hours later than I normally do because my body's trying to get that high quality sleep. But if it's metabolizing alcohol during the night, it's not doing that. So that's where I noticed it most, but you'll be surprised where you notice it as far as energy levels, focus, even like soreness. If I have a drink and I've worked out that day, I'm like 10 times more sore the next day because of that little bit of inflammation that it exacerbates.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Well, look, we'll wrap up shortly. You've got a book. Tell me about the book. Where was the inspiration, and where can people find it?
Yeah, so the book I have on Gumroad right now, it's called The Ultimate Nutrition Guide, and it was really a pet project for me to just summarize a lot of the key themes, the frameworks that I found in all of these books and podcasts that I listened to that helped me get to where I am now, where, at the time I lost about 50 pounds and then I put on another 15 to 20 pounds of muscle. And so I felt like I kind of found that sweet spot, and I just kept coming across very similar themes, a lot of which we talked about here, like prioritizing protein, eating real foods, prioritizing fermented foods. So I have the book on Gumroad right now. I'm actually redoing my website. It is tentatively live right now, and so I'm going to be having a course coming out that's focused on helping busy adults optimize their hormones. So depending on whether it's weight loss or muscle gain or just improving mood and motivation, all of that stuff is heavily dictated by our hormones. So I'm creating a course for people, again, based on a lot of the stuff that I've just pulled from different books and podcasts to help people do that. So I got the book on Gumroad right now. It'll be on my website. I also have a newsletter. So if folks are interested in just simple, actionable tips on living a healthier life, my website's longevitylifestyle.me. And you can find the newsletter on there, the book. There's a wait list for the course that'll be launching January 15th. And yeah, a lot of exciting stuff that I'm working on, but my focus is really on just helping empower people to live healthier lives.
Awesome. Well, look, I'll make sure to link to all of those different bits that you've mentioned in the show notes. But yeah, look, Andrew, it's been great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom. Great conversation. I appreciate it.
Nice one.
All right, take care.
Complete. Check. Hands.
Well up and running, baby.
Complete. Check. Hands.
Well up and running, baby.
Complete. Check. Hands.
Well up and running, baby.
Complete. Check. Hands.
Well up and running, baby.